In this video, I'm talking about the leaky gut and how you can look at it from the perspective of functional medicine and ancient Ayurveda. Leaky gut and understanding the principles of what makes a leaky gut is really key, not just to improving sleep, but to all health. So, when we're looking at the gut, we need to understand that we're talking predominantly about the small intestine. So, from the stomach, where food comes into the small intestine, and that is where it's a real space of absorption of nutrients. And this area has villi, which are these finger-like projections, almost like a carpet. This is said to increase the surface area of absorption of nutrients. And when this area gets inflamed, several things happen. One is that the body is not able to take in nutrients the way it's supposed to be, because instead of taking in microscopic particles, when there's inflammation, the walls start to widen and bigger molecules of food which are not fully broken down can go into the bloodstream, where the immune system thinks that there's a pathogen or a virus and starts to attack, and there starts a huge inflammatory cascade. So let's look at it from the perspective of science first. There are few key principles to understand, and just knowing this is a great way to understand the entire science of gut health. So you've got this gut lining, which is a mucus layer, and it's very, very thin. And on this mucus layer, there's beneficial bacteria. So they work synergistically. So let's try to understand that. When the beneficial bacteria start to proliferate on this surface, they release something called butyrate. Butyrate stimulates a cell known as the goblet cells to release mucus, so that this mucus lining is moist and becomes almost like the terrain for the growth of these beneficial bacteria. So they are supporting each other. The butyrate released by the beneficial bacteria tells the goblet cells to release mucus. In turn, the mucus becomes the terrain on which the bacteria can proliferate. So they've got this synergistic relationship and they need to work together. Now, the gut also contains something called tight junction. Now, if you think of a fabric that's woven, you will see a warp and a weft. Think about it, where this warp and weft are interwoven very closely, and that's how they're supposed to be, where very microscopic molecules are broken down. Food should only penetrate, nothing else should go through. So the body is highly intelligent. In inflammation, these tight gut junctions, which are so delicately interwoven to protect the gut, and they also have beneficial bacteria, they can become inflamed and they start to widen. So they create spaces where bigger molecules can pass through before they're fully broken down. And as I said, that's what triggers this inflammatory cascade, where the moment they go in, the body is only known to recognize food as very microscopic molecules of nutrients. Instead, there are bigger molecules. It gets confused and it starts to attack it. And as long as the gut stays inflamed and these molecules keep passing through, what occurs is that the body stays in a state of chronic inflammation. Now, let's look at the same thing from an Ayurvedic perspective. The best way for the gut to stay in perfect balance, where it's not permeable or inflamed, is when the three doshas are all in balance. So you've got this mucus layer and you've got the beneficial bacteria. Now, this is a very, very nuanced and gentle area, this moist membrane. When there is excess vata, where there's a tendency for the body to become cold and dry, the excess dryness can create tears in this lining. When there's excess pitta, excess histamine, this excess heat of fire, it can inflame the area. When there's excess kapha and moistness, it becomes like a puddle which breeds pathogens. So we want the three doshas to be in balance, so that is how the gut remains in balance and there's no leaky gut. Now, another thing to understand is that The gut or the small intestine is the primary home of Pitta dosha. So when Pitta gets excess and the body is shifting into this fiery state, it first starts to increase the dosha in its home site, which is the small intestine, and from there it can spill this heat everywhere. And this is what we can even understand as how the blood carries this heat everywhere. So the small intestine is the home of Pitta dosha. When it is in excess and there's the state of being hot and fiery, the walls can get inflamed, and excess Pitta is a lot about inflammation, and it allows any toxin, unwanted toxins, to pass through the gut walls into the bloodstream. Now, the other thing to understand is that when digestion is compromised overall, remember that instead of creating nutrient and waste, we end up not nourishing our body and producing ama or toxins from undigested food. Now, when we have our ama already and there is inflammation in the gut, toxins or ama can pass through, and this is what triggers the immune attack. It can lead to autoimmunity. So the Ayurvedic perspective to autoimmunity is leaky gut coming from dosha imbalance, excess fire, and ama passing through these walls. So just to understand that this is how to understand a leaky gut, trying to just live in sync with nature, in sync with the earth's diurnal rhythms of light and darkness, and look at therapies overall. That, for example, Abhyanga can be a great way to balance all three doshas and support Agni. So rather than getting caught into a prescriptive and protocol based just one nutrient for gut healing, focus on gently balancing the entire body as a whole, all of which you are doing through this end.